Welcome back to the Thermo Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Jayton Miller, and today I have on the podcast Miss Meg Langston. So today we talk about the menstrual cycle. We talk about the different parts of the menstrual cycle, what makes a menstrual cycle difficult to deal with, how do you overcome some of those difficulties, what are some of the benefits of actually having a period, and why it may give women a hand up whenever it comes to health and kind of telling them what's going on with their body and stuff like that. So I'm super excited for y'all to listen to this episode. It's filled with golden nuggets. So let's get into it. How's it going today, guys? I am here with Meg Langston. How you doing today, Meg?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So, Meg, do you mind telling the audience kind of where you came from and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to keep this brief, but I think it's so important when you get to know me that you know my story, because a lot of what I talk about is from trial and error. And I think especially because I feel like this podcast is going to be a lot towards women talking about the menstrual cycle. And I feel like a lot of us females have a similar story. I don't know, maybe men do too, but so I grew up a pretty competitive athlete. I played soccer my whole life, and very competitively. I was in something called Olympic Development Program. I was playing in high school. I was playing in club, missed a lot of dances. And then eventually was so burnt out, didn't play in college. And I started to put weight on in college. I remember calling my dad one time and he was like, well, what are you eating? I'm like, well, Special K for breakfast, because this is when Special K was like the end all be all. Maybe it still is, but I definitely thought if it had dried strawberries in there, it was really healthy. And then pasta for lunch, and Jimmy John's for dinner, turkey sandwich and white bread. And he'd be like, well, that's just all carbs. Like, don't I need carbs? He's like, you're not like an athlete anymore. So anyway, that was the first time I had ever identified food impacts your body and what are carbs. And I say this as a joke, but it is really sad. Back in 2007, when I was in college, they didn't have I guess Facebook was just starting out, but it wasn't like Instagram was there, and it wasn't like you were looking at information for health on Facebook, at least that I knew of. And so I was going to magazines, and I was letting magazines tell me, this is what is healthy. This is what defines health. And it was always a picture of a woman's body that was very slender or extremely shredded. And they were always talking about the kale salads and the kale smoothies, and how to, in a way, eat less and how to do more. And so I really took that on, because I'm an extreme person. I think the best way to describe my personality is I never ran a marathon in my life, and I went for a full marathon and then backed off from there. And that's just completely my personality. So I took it very extreme on. And then I dabbled, like I said, because I've always been an athlete, I've always dabbled in a bunch of sports and got into marathons, triathlons, got into bodybuilding. And all along the way, I had developed really disordered eating habits from trying to do more, eat less, and then an eating disorder because I just didn't feel good enough about my skin. I talk a lot about identity and in this health world, industry where it's very heavily focused on nutrition, we also have to be content and happy in our own lives, so that this holistic world of nutrition doesn't just consume us. And it definitely was consuming me and becoming my identity, rather than just enjoying life and being who I am. And so anyway, I got really involved in the fitness industry. I had a lot of really awesome opportunities. I was a paid athlete to do have you ever heard of the Olympia?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Olympia, and to do the Arnold. And so I was wearing little sports bras and shorts, which if you knew me, that's that would never be anything I'd wear. But I was lost in my identity, getting praised for my body.
That's quite a feat too. That's a lot to accomplish too.
It took a lot of extreme behavior. And not everyone does it that way, but that's how I did it. And I think a large majority of that fitness industry does do it that way. I was taking fat burners. I had tried SARMs at one time, which really messes with your testosterone and hormones. I was doing anything that I could to like look shredded and maintain energy to keep that up. And so eventually I got into like more Olympic lifting and CrossFit, really fell in love with Olympic lifting. But it was the same thing. It was like, in order to lift really heavy and be impressive, you had to weigh less. So it was like manipulating weight and just back to that same cycle. And I met my husband and was on this journey of like, how do I become healthy? How do I identify with health? And the difference for me with from the bodybuilding to like the strength community was like, they did push for more like performance and less on body image. So it did give me the start of a mental shift of like, okay, maybe it's not just about my body image. And like, I mean, this is a whole nother other topic, but like all along I was really faith was really important to me. And I was really kind of like finding out who I was in my faith and like, just like, what did I believe about body image? What did I believe about like this diet culture that was saying like, this is what defines health. And eventually it took me to a place where I was trying to get off birth control and I was about to get married and I wanted to, I didn't want to be on birth control. There was like no point or anything like that for me to be on it. And I started to like try to figure out what my cycle was doing because I didn't have a period anymore, which is really common post birth control syndrome. And that is really what led me to learning about, oh my gosh, your cycle has so much to say about your health. Because my temperatures were like 95.9, like they were so low. And these books were saying like, hey, a healthy temp is this. And I was like, wait a second. So what does that mean? Oh, okay. That means my thyroid is not functioning well. And then, went to a holistic doctor and got all the lab work done after being failed by conventional doctors. And here we are. Now I serve women that are having any kind of dysfunctional, conditions from infertility to hormonal imbalances, I mean, even acne to thyroid, all of the things. But it really started when the information really started when I was learning about my menstrual cycle, which is really cool.
Heck yeah. That's awesome. So the menstrual cycle is something that you're very familiar with. Do you mind kind of giving us an overview of the menstrual cycle and like the different parts of it and how it works?
Yeah, no problem. So I actually don't think a lot of women know this. And when you first start as a woman, start to learn about your cycle, you're just like so defeated on why and disappointed on why you were not taught this as a young woman, because all of these things make so much sense once you start to learn that this is a really natural thing occurring in your body. And if you're a male listening to this podcast, I would say like just continue to listen, because this is important for you to understand if you're ever coaching anybody in terms of like nutrition or health or hormones or a trainer, because a woman's body is so vastly different from a male's. Our cycle changes within a month, where a male's is like 24 hours, right? So a woman's menstrual cycle is biphasic, meaning it has two phases, from the follicular phase to the luteal phase. And what separates the two is ovulation, which is like the main event. So the follicular phase is very estrogen dominant, and it is known as the pre-ovulatory phase because it's before you ovulate. And this phase is anywhere from 10 to 23 days. On average, it's about 15 days. And this is where it can vary. So I'll talk about what a healthy cycle looks like, and then where you can find abnormal cycles, or like where dysfunction can happen. So the cycles on average, the follicular phase rather, is on average 15 days. And if you're taking your basal body temperature, which is basically taking your first morning temperature before you get out of bed, you would do this because one, it's great at checking to see, Dr. Barnes talks about this, but at checking to see how your thyroid is. And then 2, it's the only way females can confirm ovulation. LH sticks don't work because you can miss it, miss the LH surge, which happens during ovulation. And then you don't want to rely just on cervical mucus, because that if you're having an unhealthy luteal phase, which we'll talk about, that could show up. So you always want to use the basal body temperature to confirm that ovulation has happened. And a good temp is around 97.66 in that follicular phase. So anything above that is, considered really healthy and of high functioning thyroid. Anything below that is a good indication that there's some sluggish thyroid happening, maybe some hypothyroidism. And so, like I said, that this is a varied part of the cycle. So if you're somebody that has longer cycles, then you are going to have, which is above, oh gosh, I want to say, I can't remember right now. It's 42 days, I would say, is abnormal. I'm trying to pull up a note here. 35 days. 42 would be considered too long. Sorry. So 24 to 35 days. So if it's above 35 days, your cycle's longer than 35 days, then that is a good indication that that follicular phase is too long. And what would cause your cycle to be long is delayed ovulation. So your body's just not feeling safe enough to ovulate. So why would your body not feel safe enough to ovulate? It could be stressors. It could be like happy stressors, like planning for a wedding. It could be moving. It could be alcohol. It could be just trauma. It could be gut infections. So there's lots of things that would cause delayed ovulation, but nonetheless, it's a stressor. And fertility always matters because it's a sign of health. Like, your body should always want to get pregnant, and your body should always be able to get pregnant. I mean, obviously there's things that, well, your body should always be trying to get pregnant, right? Or at least be healthy enough to get pregnant is a better way to say that. And so when it's not, it's gonna protect itself and say, I'm not ready to ovulate. And that's why a cycle would go longer, is because it doesn't feel safe enough. And ovulation matters because not just for pregnancy, but because in a woman, ovulation is what strengthens their bones, our bones, heart, and brain. And so every time you ovulate, you're actually like kind of banking that those health benefits for later on in your life. And this is why it's so scary to think about the birth control pill, because it actually suppresses ovulation. So not only is it suppressing the benefits of what I just said, like your heart, your health, your bone health, and your brain, you're not getting those benefits. But what comes after ovulation is something called the corpus luteum. It's a gland that your body makes, a female's body makes, and it produces progesterone. So when you're not ovulating on the birth control pill, you are not making that hormone progesterone, that is completely the female hormone that opposes estrogen, that protects our stress response, that supports thyroid function. And that's an issue. So does that make sense on the follicular phase?
Definitely.
Okay. So I think, like, I feel like it's a lot of information, but like the most important things to think about is like the follicular phase is from your period bleed to ovulation. It's on average about 15 days. You absolutely do not ovulate on day 14 every month, like doctors would say. Your ovulation can vary, and you only ovulate one day, but you are fertile anywhere from 2 to 7 days out of the month. And that's because women have something called cervical mucus, which is like a discharge, but that's actually really, really healthy for a female to have. It's a type of estrogen, but it actually, like, its purpose is to capture the sperm, feed the sperm, and take the sperm where it needs to go. So it's like, our bodies are so amazing, and women usually like get super embarrassed about that or feel weird. And it's like, no, that's the most healthy thing your body can do during that time frame. So then you ovulate. And then you step into the luteal phase, which is the last half of your cycle. And so the luteal phase is not going to ever change, meaning the length will always be 10 to 16 days. It will never be more than 16 days. It can, if you're low in progesterone, be less than 10 days, which is a good sign for you. If you're getting your period really, really soon, you have short cycles, that's a good indication that you have low progesterone. And remember that progesterone is so important for thyroid function. It's anti-stress hormone. It is incredible for calming the body back down and therapeutic for the thyroid and things like that. So anything less would be a progesterone deficiency. But that luteal phase is anywhere from 10 to 16 days. Under 10 days is progesterone deficiency. And this is where we will see a lot of estrogen dominance type of symptoms. So this is where women would have, although very common, is absolutely not considered healthy. PMS symptoms, tender breasts, extreme cramping, mood swings, and that's a big sign of estrogen dominance, and it would be because your body's not producing enough progesterone. If you were to take your basal body temperature here, it should be about 98.4 is like a really good temp shift. So 97.6, ovulation happens, and then it spikes up to at least like 98.4 would be a really like healthy, flourishing thyroid and body.
Is that due to thyroid performance or an increase in progesterone?
Increase of progesterone.
Okay.
Yeah, progesterone is going to raise the basal body temperature.
Okay.
And I feel like a really common thing that will happen here too is that a lot of women will notice histamine issues here, and that's because estrogen drives histamine and histamine drives estrogen. It's like this vicious battle. So when women complain about headaches before their menstrual cycle, or even ovulation, because ovulation, you get a surge of estrogen. If you get a headache during ovulation or notice any other kind of like allergy type symptoms, it's usually driven by histamine. And I was saying this earlier to somebody, but it's so funny because when I was working on fixing my hormones, I was doing everything that these books said to do. I was supplementing with zinc. I was taking magnesium. I was seed cycling. Do you know what seed cycling is?
No.
Okay, so seed cycling is just basically like you take different seeds, like it's like pumpkin seed and sesame seed and flax seed, and you grind them up depending on where your cycle is. And this is problematic because seeds are a polyunsaturated fat or a PUFA. And so they're causing excess estrogen to happen. So their purpose is to help detox estrogen, yet the very nature of the seed is actually promoting estrogen. So these books are talking about, taking zinc, and zinc actually depletes our bioavailable copper. And bioavailable copper is important for thyroid function. It's also important for breaking down histamine along with magnesium. So it's so interesting because I was doing all these things and I could never, ever get better. And now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's because I was doing everything that depleted like my bioavailable copper and put stress on my body so depletes magnesium, and then was increasing estrogen because I was eating so many PUFAs and all those things. So yeah, I there's so much more to say about that. Do you have any questions on that?
No, I think it makes pretty good sense. So as you see the rhythm of estrogen go up, your body temperature usually goes down.
Correct.
And then as estrogen goes down and progesterone goes up, your body temperature will rise naturally with that as well?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. So what are the main things that you would do to help with harsh periods?
Harsh periods, like painful periods or cramping. So we look at that and we say that's a lot of excess estrogen. So you want to look at a woman's body and support the detoxification of estrogen. So the liver, which has over 500 jobs, also one of its main jobs is to get rid of excess estrogen. in the body. And so you want to support the liver, which helps get rid of excess estrogen. So that looks like dandelion root. That can look like eating beets, which actually helps thin the bile. The bile is what will help release the toxins and excess hormones. So anything that will help support the liver, castor oil packs, will help decrease estrogen. One of my favorite things, which is like so simple to do, is eating a raw carrot salad. Do you do this?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So Ray Pete's raw carrot salad. It is like the cheapest, most like effective thing that I can, like, if you can't sit still for 45 minutes to an hour for a castor oil pack, no big deal. At least get in a raw carrot salad, because they're so beneficial at uniquely binding to excess estrogen and helping it be removed from the body, and endotoxins. And anytime you have endotoxins, it's feeding bacteria, and bacteria is promoting estrogen. So I would say supporting the liver. And again, that looks like supporting bile flow, which is beets, dandelion root tea, castor oil packs, eating raw carrots every single day. And then really supporting the thyroid. So eating something that's not always talked about with the thyroid, and I love that Morley Robbins talks about this so much, is getting enough vitamin A in, because it helps with the conversions, or helps with thyroid hormone. And so vitamin A would be like eating high quality saturated fats from animal meats like beef, bison, things like that. So that's really important to get in.
Good amount of liver.
Good amount of liver. Yes. Yeah. Are you eating liver? Do you eat it or supplement?
I eat it.
You're so good. I want to. My mom makes the best liver pate, and I wish that I could duplicate the recipe, because I actually love the liver pate, but I cannot make it myself. So I'm still supplementing. But if you can eat liver, I mean, that is one of the most beneficial nutrients in all things thyroid, all things hormones. I mean, all things.
There's two things that I found that make it more tolerable. Number one, mixing it with ground beef. So if you toss it up and just toss it in with the ground beef, you can't hardly taste it at all. Second is freezing it and then tossing it in my smoothie in the mornings, and you can't taste it past the berries.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what else do you put in your smoothie?
So it's kind of a weird smoothie. I do pineapple. I do a berry mix that has cherries, blueberries, and some blackberries. And then I'll do cottage cheese because it makes it a little more creamy. And then I'll do some like non-fat milk, and it's gold. And then sometimes I'll toss some collagen in there as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. It sounds weird, actually. I'll be honest. It sounds weird, but I would try it. And I'm glad actually you brought that up, because dairy is like such a hot topic for hormones and removing dairy. And I think you and I are definitely on the same page about this, that dairy is one of the most abundant nutrients that you can actually consume. And so if your body's unable to digest dairy, you really want to look at why your body's unable to digest dairy. So, I mean, anytime you address the gut, you can't just address the gut. You have to support metabolic function. And when I say that, I mean like metabolism, because the metabolism impacts the digestive system. And when we're talking about the digestive system, we're talking about being able to properly break down your protein, carbs, and fat. And when people have a sluggish thyroid, they are going to have a hard time breaking down protein, carbs, and fat. Sluggish thyroid is going to slow down the digestive system, and it's going to allow for undigested foods to ferment and putrefy in the gut, which can feed bacteria and cause a whole number of issues. And this can make it really hard to digest dairy. So, you know, I always say, like, of course, and there's allergies out there, but if there is, it's usually like having to address the gut a little bit and reestablishing the metabolism to run optimally before just like completely eliminating it, because it is so pro-thyroid. And anything that is so pro-thyroid is so pro-hormone and getting rid of excess estrogen. I do the GI map stool analysis in my practice, which some people love, some people hate. I actually love it, as long as you're working with the metabolism alongside of it, so that you're not just addressing the gut and then leaving the person with the slow thyroid and slow metabolism, because then of course it's going to just happen again in a few months. But I usually do something that like a quick like oregano supplement or something to kind of help get rid of the dysbiotic bacteria to make it easier to digest dairy. But for those that are like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll see how it helps me. I would start out really, really slow. Did you ever eliminate it from your diet?
Dairy? I did.
Yeah.
I did at one point, and because basically, I had trouble digesting it for quite a while whenever I was severely hypothyroid,
Mhm.
and so it's due to the lack of the ability to produce the enzymes that are necessary to break down the proteins. Because, like, you have less stomach acid whenever you're hypothyroid, less enzymes when you're hypothyroid, and then you have a dysbiosis within the microbiome, and so it took me quite a while before I was able to do it, and I introduced it very slowly. And I took Kate Deering's approach, where she starts with higher fat derivatives of milk, and then she also starts with cheeses. So she'll do like Parmigiano
Yeah.
Reggiano, and she'll start with those first because they're typically a little bit easier to digest. But before that, I actually started with goat dairy. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
those molecules are a little bit easier on the digestive system. So I started with that, then moved over to regular dairy, the higher fat derivatives, and then moved down to the lower fat derivatives whenever I was, prepared.
Yeah, that's exactly what I tell my clients to do, and exactly what I did, because I stayed away from it for so long when I was trying to. And I didn't say this, but through all of the madness, I caused myself subclinical hypothyroidism. I mean, most of us have it, right? So, because I couldn't digest dairy well because my thyroid was so low, when I finally started to introduce it, it took me about a full month to totally do it, which is interesting. I just recently saw a study that said it takes about 21 days to get that enzyme lactase back to be able to break it down. But I did the same thing. I started out with Parmesan cheese and then goat's milk. And then eventually felt confident enough to go to a local farmer and get raw milk. In Georgia, it's not legal for humans, but it is for pet consumption. So we go to our local farmer. They very well know that we're drinking it, but on the cap it says for pet consumption only. And if you're able to, raw dairy is so beneficial. I don't know, is Colorado, are you able to get raw dairy?
You have to buy a share in the cow.
Okay.
So technically you're getting the milk from your cow whenever you do that.
Oh, that's good.
Hmm.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's so interesting to me that like alcohol and everything else is so legal, but it's like God forbid you eat anything that's like healthy. But that's because it works, right?
Hmm.
It's a whole nother topic.
Definitely. So what do you see whenever women have difficult periods? What are some of the most common mistakes that you see them doing whenever they're trying to handle that?
Yeah, I think where it starts is that most women undereat. And maybe not intentionally, but I think most of the time it is intentionally because it goes back to that identity part where for some reason body image is and I don't know if it's like this for males, but there's such a driving force of like being successful, being a good mom, being a good business owner. Like if you can look good while doing it, like you are somehow more successful. And even I feel like that's so untalked about, but it is true. Like there's this driving force of like everything goes back to how you look. So I say that because when somebody is trying to fix their hormones but still obsessed with their body image, they tend to not eat enough. And anytime not eating enough causes stress in our body. Our body stress is stress to our body. Again, whether that's planning for a wedding or under eating. And when we undereat, it messes with our blood sugar. It causes blood sugar dysregulation. And it causes our body to produce cortisol, and cortisol will rise estrogen. So I think the most common thing, which is the hardest thing to tell women, is that you have to eat enough. And what does enough mean? I mean, you could get with a coach that knows macros that will find something appropriate for you. Or you can just try to eat till you're satisfied. I don't always push for macro counting just because I think a lot of women are it just kind of feeds into that diet culture. I think it can be used as a tool for a short period of time. But I typically have women just kind of go towards how they're feeling during a meal. You don't want to feel overly stuffed, but you definitely don't want to feel hungry. And you should, I recommend waking up within the first 30 minutes of waking and eating every 3 to 4 hours after that. That's going to help manage blood sugar, which is going to help reduce stress levels in the body and therefore excess estrogen. So the most simple thing you can do is make sure that you're eating enough and frequently enough as a female. From there, I think that one of the most, and same thing with over exercising. Women are working out, going to Orange Theory like 5 times a week. That's a high intensity interval training. That's a lot on your body. I find that most women do well with like 2 to 3 times a week, which I think is another struggle to try to get people to say like, hey, you've got to calm down on your workouts and you're going to be okay. But ultimately it is going to help kind of calm the body back down from that stress. So I would say over exercising, under eating, and then doing the things like I said before. I mean, so many of these books are talking about supplementing with zinc, and even with like the virus that's going around, women and men are supplementing with zinc to support their immune system. And the reason that is not good is because it depletes that bioavailable copper I was talking about. And bioavailable copper is incredibly therapeutic towards hormones and getting the hormones in balance in the thyroid. So not supplementing blindly, I think, is really important. And instead, if you're like, okay, well then how do I get bioavailable copper in? Focusing on foods like liver, bee pollen, whole foods vitamin C, and oysters, things like that are going to be really therapeutic for not only the thyroid but hormones in general. Anytime you're talking about thyroid, you're talking about hormones. So I think that is really important. A mineral that is also missed is magnesium. Do you take magnesium?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you usually use bicarbonate or do you use glycinate in those other forms as well?
I do bicarbonate.
Okay.
What about you?
I like the glycinate form just because it has the glycine attached to it.
Uh-huh.
I also know that the citrate is okay. It's not really as favorable. And then the aspartate is usually pretty good as well. But I'll do that. And then I'll also do the magnesium salt baths as well.
Okay. That's so great for anybody that's looking for that has those headaches during their ovulation or during their period. If you or their week before their period, if they're getting headaches, getting a magnesium flake bath or Epsom salt bath can be so quickly. The magnesium quickly absorbs into your body and can help kind of break up that histamine in those headaches. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's so huge.
Yeah, the recipe that I use, just so they know, is like I'll do a cup of baking soda with a cup of the magnesium salt flakes, and then every once in a while I'll toss in like some aspirin in there as well to further enhance the oxidative metabolism. And
are you taking aspirin on a regular basis?
No, I don't. Just because I've gotten a few hair analysis back that showed anemia, so I'm not afraid of the anemic part. It's just I don't want to further chelate the iron just because of that. So I'm focusing on my copper and zinc right now, but yeah, it's just not something that I want to further kind of mess with in that realm.
Yeah, super interesting. And for those, I am definitely not an expert in this at all, but I think it's worth explaining a little bit to get people to do their own research and get inspired by it. I'm actually going back and taking Morley's class, Morley Robbins, his class in February, practitioner class. But first of all, the birth control pill has iron in it, and iron will feed estrogen and pathogens in the body. So when a woman has just continued excess estrogen symptoms, oftentimes they also have iron overload in the body, which won't necessarily show up on blood work. And that's because they're not eating the same, the nutrients that we talked about before, the minerals of bioavailable copper, magnesium, things that help move iron appropriately in the body. But I think it's worthwhile to note that when you're not on your cycle, when you're on your birth control and you're not having a regular cycle or period, then you're also accumulating iron and estrogen in the body, because one of the benefits to having your menstrual cycle is you will help iron appropriately leave the body the way that it should. So it's just something else to think about when you're on the birth control pill, or when you're getting off and you continue to have these excess estrogen symptoms. It's also contributing to iron overload, and it goes right back to why those minerals are so important to consume in your diet, which is that bee pollen, the beef liver, the oysters, the dairy. All of those have minerals and just nutrients in them that help iron move appropriately, so therefore will help estrogen detox the way that it should be.
Definitely. One thing that you mentioned earlier was some of the benefits that the menstrual cycle can have. Can you kind of go into what some of those benefits are and how they work?
Yeah. So I did a presentation in Chicago one time on the menstrual cycle, and I I heard a speaker say this one time, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And so the title was A Woman's Unfair Advantage, because it's absolutely true. Like, we as women have an unfair advantage to checking in and to seeing how our health is on a regular basis. And that's because our menstrual cycle is going to reflect how healthy we are. If our temperatures are lower in the follicular phase or the luteal phase, that's a good indication that our thyroid is not working the way that it should be, and it's sluggish. So that's going to throw everything off, from digestion to hormones. Our cycle will show us if we're having too much stress. So if we have delayed ovulation, that is going to show us that we've got to cut back on stress. And this is why I think fertility awareness method, which is just basically what I'm talking about, learning how to understand your cycle, is going to be so beneficial, because for women to really just be empowered to be able to say, oh, okay, like I actually ovulated way too early, so that means that I have actually excess estrogen, or I'm ovulating way too late, so that means that I have too much stress going on in my body. Where do I have to manipulate? I need to put up more boundaries. I need to help delegate, XYZ, so that I can calm my body back down. I need to be making sure that I'm eating enough. And during ovulation, women should have a sex drive. Like, our bodies are meant to produce then. So like, it's okay if like towards your period, if you're like, I'm not really feeling it. Hormones are a little bit lower there. That's not abnormal to not like completely desire sex during that part of your cycle, but you should have a sex drive. Sex drive is an indication of health, especially during that ovulation window. So if you're tracking your cycle and you know that ovulation is occurring and you're not craving sex or thinking about it, maybe you're not in a relationship, but you're not like noticing the opposite sex to be attractive, and you're not I don't know, just maybe even feeling more like vivacious, like I don't know what it would be, but like you should have somewhat of a sex drive, and you would be able to tell what's appropriate where your season is. But if not, that's your cycle will end. If you're not having a sex drive during ovulation, then okay, that's a sign of unhealthy. Maybe it's too much stress. Maybe it's excess estrogen. Same thing. Like it's a good indication that you can rely on during your menstrual cycle to be kind of a key to how your health is. And that luteal phase, I talked about cervical mucus being appropriate during the ovulation phase. During the luteal phase, a woman with PCOS or low progesterone is going to show cervical mucus or like discharge in that luteal phase. And if you are tracking where your cycle is and you know that you've already ovulated, you would know that would be inappropriate to have any kind of cervical mucus during that time. So you would be able to say, okay, like my progesterone's too low. If my progesterone's too low, that means I need to support my thyroid. That means that I need to make sure that I'm doing all XYZ. eating enough, not over exercising, getting enough varied proteins in, saturated fats in, managing stress. So, I mean, I think those are the biggest things that I can think of, but it truly is like a fifth vital sign to being able to manage your stress and your health and even your nutritional deficiencies, just by becoming familiar. And you may not need to know like every enzyme, like I'm talking about for histamine and stuff, but you can say like, oh, my temps are off. This isn't right. Or, oh, she said that cervical mucus should only be in your ovulation phase, and I've had it for 10 days straight now. Something's off. And it'll at least give you language to articulate to be able to get the help that you need.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So what would you say are some of the best tactics? You mentioned eating beets, the carrot salad, the castor oil pack. I haven't heard of that one specifically. Can you kind of go into what that is?
Yeah. So the castor oil pack is basically, most women know the castor oil for like inducing labor, which I actually took to induce labor. It is absolutely wild and definitely induces labor. But actually, I had a client that was 62 years old, and she said that she used to get it for immune boosting. They used to take a spoonful of it in the winter. Her mom always gave it to her, so I thought that was interesting. I had not heard that before. But I mean, castor oil is just a monosaturated fat. And a castor oil pack is basically taking a wool cloth, pouring castor oil on it, and then you put it under your right rib where your liver and gallbladder sits, and then a heating pad on top of it. Sit there for like 45 minutes to an hour. And it will help the liver detox for men and women. When my husband's feeling really like off or ill, I'll actually have him do it. For females, you have to be a little careful. Like if you are breastfeeding, it may not be appropriate. If there's a chance that you're pregnant, you may not want to do it after ovulation. Some people don't like to do it during their periods. I think that like towards the end of your period, it's totally fine. And you can kind of be a little bit more strategic with it, where when you're approaching ovulation, if you're somebody that has an unhealthy ovulation, meaning you are very moody, PMS type symptoms, breast tenderness, headaches, that's again, an unhealthy part of ovulation. It would be a sign of excess estrogen. So you can actually ramp up the castor oil packs leading up to ovulation, and that can kind of help. Similarly to your period, you can kind of ramp up the castor oil pack, and that will help with the detox of estrogen.
Definitely. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that is the entirety of my questions that I have for you. Is there anything else that you'd like the audience to know about?
No, I mean, I always say this, and I think that this is important. I guess I said no, and then I say I do have something. I think that when we're talking about health, it's important for me to always leave this with people's minds, because sometimes when we're trying to get healthy, we are so self-consumed, and we're doing everything that we can to soak in and consume all of the information. And the healthiest I ever am is when I'm looking out to serve other people, get involved, give my finances to support something that I care about. And so I just encourage people that when you are trying to recover from healing, or you have someone that you love that's trying to recover from healing, hormones, whatever it is, digestive issues, infertility, I encourage you to give either a part of your finances or serve somewhere else, because when you become self-consumed, it makes you sicker. And when you're able to just like take some of that stress off and really just enjoy life and kind of enjoy the happiness of other people, it allows for this internal healing and for your body to start like accepting healing a little bit more. So something that's a little bit unique, but I think that the healthiest people I see are the ones that give back the most, and it with healthy boundaries. And when my clients, when they give, or in any capacity, they also improve their healing the fastest. So food for thought.
That's awesome. So where can people find you on social media, website, stuff like that?
Yeah. So my Instagram is Meg, MEG _Langston, LANGSTON. And I have a website, meglangston.com. I have a course. So if you are looking to maybe not work with me one-on-one, but you want to do the course, so you want to get testing done with me, you can do that. And my course is just called the Rebalance course. And it's basically talking about everything from hormones to thyroid and supporting the body using nutrients and things like the Castor Oil packs and things like that. So that's what I offer right now. The one-on-one to work with me, I do have a little bit of a wait to like end of January, February, but depending on when you hear this, you can reach out to me still.
Heck yeah. Sounds good. Well, for all those who listening, make sure to give her a follow on Instagram. Check out her website. She actually has a pretty good website. I was looking at it this morning and it's pretty nice. So
Yeah.
I recommend checking it out. But that's all for this one. Meg, thanks for your time. I appreciate you hopping on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you want us to cover a different topic.